They say everyone has a routine. Katie Eggleston's routine was simple. Wake up, go to work, make sales calls, come home. But on August 2nd, 1993, that routine was broken forever. At 2:15 in the afternoon, the 22-year-old was seen stepping off an elevator with a man nobody knew. She would never be seen again. Her car would be found abandoned. Her family would search for decades. And the questions would multiply with each passing year. Katie Eggleston was born on May 4th, 1971, in Redmond, Oregon, to Paul and Heather Eggleston. Her father was a former Seattle high school teacher who became superintendent of Redmond School District, while her mother taught elementary school. She was one of 4 daughters raised in Redmond, and everyone knew her by her nickname, Katie. Growing up in Central Oregon, Katie was the kind of person who lit up a room. Her friends described her as always joking, the life of the party, and she had a particular fondness for the color purple. She wasn't just popular, she was driven, ambitious, the type of young woman who seemed destined for success. Katie attended Oregon State University in Corvallis, where she joined the Alpha Chi Omega sorority. In spring 1993, she graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in English. College had been good to her. She even knew Pete Simpson, who would later become a Portland police sergeant. They went to OSU together, lived next door, and just a month before Simpson was hired as a police officer, Katie went missing. After graduation, Katie moved to Gresham, Oregon, a Portland suburb, where she lived with her older sister Janet. Then 37 years old, she landed a job with AllNet Communication Services, a telecommunications company based in Lake Oswego, working as a salesperson. It was the kind of entry-level position that promised a bright future. Good money, professional development, a foot in the door of the booming telecommunications industry. By 1993, Katie was a 22-year-old recent graduate who had just been employed by AllNet Communications. On August 3rd, 1993, she was reported missing by her family. But to understand what happened, we need to go back one day, to August 2nd, when everything changed. That morning, Katie left the company's Lake Oswego office to attend a business meeting in Portland, then stopped at several businesses on Northeast Whitaker Way. It was her first day making sales visits alone. For a young salesperson, this was a big deal. The training wheels were off, and she was finally flying solo. She made her rounds methodically. First, she stopped at a bank and a gasoline station. Then she had lunch at a Burger King restaurant near Lloyd Center in the Lloyd district. Employees at the Burger King remembered seeing her there. Everything seemed normal, just another work day for a young professional. Shortly after lunch, Katie arrived at the 700 building, then known as the Port of Portland building, at 700 Northeast Multnomah Street, about 2 blocks from Lloyd Center. She was seen making phone calls in the building lobby, but 5 witnesses who saw her there noticed something was off. They all said she appeared preoccupied and worried. She was dressed professionally that day, wearing a dark purple blazer, white blouse, black skirt and white stockings. Purple, her favorite color. It's a detail that would stick with her friends for decades. At approximately 2:15 p.m., the man with whom Katie had her appointment witnessed her exiting an elevator in the lobby with a man wearing a blue blazer. The client described the unknown man as having dark hair and a dark complexion. This was the last time she was seen. Think about that moment. A young woman steps off an elevator with a stranger. In any other story, it would be forgotten instantly, just another random interaction in a busy building. But for Katie Eggleston, it was the last moment anyone would see her alive. Katie's absence was first noticed when she failed to return to AllNet's Lake Oswego office, where she was supposed to meet her advisor at 5 p.m. Around 5 p.m., a witness named John Davis spotted Katie's gray Volkswagen Golf still in the Port of Portland building parking lot. When Katie didn't come home that night, Janet notified their father, who immediately traveled to the Portland area from Redmond on August 3rd. The Eggleston family wasn't the type to wait around. They knew something was wrong. In the early morning hours of August 3rd, a security guard at an industrial complex at Northeast 122nd Avenue and Airport Way discovered Katie's Volkswagen Golf parked in the lot, approximately 9 miles from the port of Portland building where it was last seen, near Portland International Airport. The doors were unlocked. All windows were rolled down, with the keys still in the ignition. Her purse and its contents were in the car, including a checkbook, credit cards, and a small amount of cash. Her workout clothes were in the back seat, but her Allnet binder was missing. Notably, her passport was also absent. Katie's parents revealed that she had retrieved her passport from their Redmond residence while visiting 10 days prior. This detail would become crucial to the police investigation and a source of deep frustration for the family. Friends and family launched a desperate search. "We were digging through blackberry bushes and weeds, just looking for anything," said Treasure Lewis, one of Katie's best friends. But the search ended when clues and leads became dead ends after a few days. To further search efforts, Allnet funded a tip hotline dedicated to tips in Katie's disappearance, while flyers promising a $5,000 reward were distributed along interstate 5 between Eugene and Everett, Washington in mid-August. Then came a chilling development. One anonymous call placed to the tip hotline was made by a man who claimed to have abducted Katie and murdered her 2 weeks after her disappearance. The anonymous caller, who allegedly spoke with a southern dialect, stated that she would never be found because I killed her. Imagine being Katie's parents hearing about this call. Was it real? Was it some sick prank? The not knowing must have been torture. But instead of galvanizing the investigation, the Portland police seemed to be heading in a completely different direction. The investigation by Portland law enforcement became significantly focused on Katie's elder sister's upcoming court sentencing regarding tax evasion. Detectives theorized that Katie may have fled intentionally to avoid testifying against her sister, though her family repeatedly denied any connection between the two incidents. Police theorized that Katie had gone missing intentionally, possibly to avoid testifying in a potential court case against her sister Janet for tax evasion. Janet and her former husband were accused of failing to report around $190,000 in business income between 1986 and 1987. But here's where the police theory falls apart. Janet and her ex-husband Jeffrey Taylor had both pleaded guilty to their charges on July 9th, foregoing a trial, meaning Katie would not have had to testify in the first place. The very premise of the police's theory was built on sand. This revelation, and detectives' focus on it as a potential motive for Katie to flee, led to strife between the family and investigators, specifically lead detective Terry Wagner. Paul Eggleston later stated, "Wagner made it crystal clear she was not going to talk with us, that she still believed Katie probably disappeared of her own will." On October 12th, law enforcement told the media that they maintained their stance, that Katie had disappeared willingly, citing the lack of physical evidence, as well as Katie's missing passport, again suggesting she had fled to avoid testifying against her sister Janet. After Janet's October 12th sentencing over the tax evasion charges, she told the media that her case was unrelated to her sister's disappearance, commenting, "To imply any connection tarnishes her in a way that is unbelievably painful to me." The family wasn't going to sit back and accept the police's theory. Katie's family hired a retired Oregon State Police detective to further investigate the disappearance case, and several leads were produced. One of the leads regarded a security guard who possessed keys to the Port of Portland building's parking garage. To Katie's parents, detectives had taken a wrong turn early in the investigation and never looked back. "She was murdered," her father said with simple conviction. To the Egglestons, the police bureau's theory was ludicrous. Katie had no history of mental illness, no history of running away. She was a sorority member who had sought office at Oregon State University, who had a brand new degree and a brand new job, whose friends described her as always joking, the life of the party, and whose 2 parents, 3 sisters, and 4 nieces and nephews, to whom her new co-workers said she seemed very attached. Katie's parents, Paul and Heather, spent years keeping their daughter's case and memory alive. They created a hotline number, hired a private detective, and ran down every lead they could. The Egglestons launched their own investigation. They canvassed Portland office buildings, interviewed potential witnesses, worked with a private investigator, manned a tip hotline, and filled 5 binders with more than 900 pages of information about Katie's and other cases. One of the most disturbing leads came from an unexpected source. A Portland man told Paul Eggleston he twice had seen a woman at the gas station where he worked, at Southeast 122nd Avenue and Stark Street, around the time Katie disappeared. The woman, he was positive, was Katie. The first time, he gave her directions to the airport and saw her drive northbound on 122nd Avenue. A short time later, the same woman drove a different car, a bluish-green Honda hatchback, southbound on 122nd and back into the station. This time, the woman was accompanied by 2 black men, one in the passenger seat, one in the back. She was also, contrary to her earlier professional appearance, disheveled, partially undressed and crying. If this witness was right, it painted a horrifying picture of Katie's final hours. But was his identification accurate? Memory can play tricks, especially when a case gets heavy media coverage. The police apparently didn't put much stock in this sighting, but for the Eggleston family, it was another piece of evidence that their daughter hadn't left willingly. Years passed. Days turned into weeks, months turned into years. "I think in the first couple of weeks there was optimism that something would be found," Lewis said. "I didn't think this would go on for 22 years. Then in 2004, another young woman vanished in Oregon, and the similarities were impossible to ignore. 19-year-old Brooke Wilberger disappeared on May 24, 2004. The Brigham Young university student was home in Oregon, visiting family and helping out at an apartment complex in Corvallis when she vanished from the parking lot while cleaning lampposts. The parallels between Katie and Brooke were striking. Katie had just graduated from college, and Brooke was a college sophomore. Both women had blonde hair and blue eyes, and they were close in age. Brooke was 19 years old, just 3 years younger than Katie. In November 2004, a University of New Mexico foreign exchange student who was beaten and raped before escaping identified Joel Patrick Courtney as her attacker. On September 12, 2007, Courtney pleaded guilty to the attack. Police eventually linked Courtney, a native of Portland, Oregon, to Brooke's disappearance. Joel Patrick Courtney ultimately pleaded guilty to the aggravated murder of Wilberger. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As part of a plea deal, Courtney admitted to the kidnapping, rape and murder of Brooke Wilberger and led authorities to her shallow grave deep in the Oregon woods. Joel Patrick Courtney is considered a possible suspect in Katie's case. Authorities believe he has harmed other women besides Wilberger, and Katie is considered a possible victim. The details about Courtney were chilling. He has a long history of criminal offenses, substance abuse, and possible mental illness. He had a record of sexual assault dating from age 18. As a teenager, Courtney started getting in trouble at age 13, and at 14 he got interested in Satanism. Courtney's sister, Dina McBride, told Dateline that while growing up in Oregon, Courtney fell into drugs, dabbled in Satanism, was in and out of juvenile hall for offenses like sexual assault, and had even attempted to sexually assault her. His relatives reported sexual assaults during his teenage years. His sister and cousins reported waking up a number of times with him on top of them, sometimes straddling them, and sometimes with his hands around their neck. Could this monster have been responsible for Katie's disappearance? He's a strong suspect in the murder of Katheryne Eggleston, a saleswoman abducted from an Oregon parking lot in 1993. She was last seen walking out of an elevator with a dark-complexioned man wearing a blue blazer. The description matched the man last seen with Katie. The FBI initially investigated Courtney for Katie's case. However, in 2006, the Federal Bureau of Investigation announced that Courtney had been cleared in 2 unnamed disappearances. Though Katie's father told the Oregonian he had been informed that Courtney was still being examined as a potential suspect in her case. However, it should be emphasized that as of yet there is no solid evidence to tie Courtney to Katie. No hard evidence was ever found linking Courtney to Katie. For the Eggleston family, the possibility that their daughter's killer might have been caught, but for a different murder, must have been agonizing. If Courtney was responsible, he took that secret to prison with him. Unlike Brooks' family, the Egglestons would never get that closure. As the years dragged on, the toll on the family was immense. Katie's parents, Paul and Heather, spent years keeping their daughter's case and memory alive. They created a hotline number, hired a private detective, and ran down every lead they could. But eventually, hope faded. They felt Katie was kidnapped and murdered, most likely by someone she knew. Her friend, Jason Eppel, was convinced. I really and truly believe that it was somebody she knew. Had it been a stranger, there would have been a big fight. There's no way that somebody would have just grabbed Katie, hauled her off, and killed her without a major fight. Heather Eggleston died in July 2011. She never learned what happened to her daughter. Paul followed in March 2017. Both of Katie's parents consistently maintained that their daughter had been murdered. They went to their graves, never knowing what happened to their little girl. For Katie's friends, the pain continues. Lewis and Eppel say they still have dreams of their friend wearing her favorite color, purple. Every once in a while I'll have a dream that she's in. We are trying to ask her questions. Where are you? Where have you been? What happened? Lewis said. But she never says anything. There's never any closure. The investigation into Katie's disappearance revealed troubling patterns in how missing persons cases are handled. When an adult goes missing, police often assume they left voluntarily. In Katie's case, the focus on her sister's tax problems seemed to give investigators an easy out, a theory that let them file the case away as voluntary disappearance rather than potential foul play. But every piece of evidence suggested otherwise. Katie is not believed to have left of her own accord. She has no history of mental illness or runaway behavior, and she was close to her family, which included her parents, 3 sisters, and 4 nieces and nephews. She had just started her job at AllNet, selling long-distance services. It was her first day on the job alone. At the time of her disappearance, Katie had not yet cashed her first paycheck. Who walks away from a new job without even cashing their first paycheck? There were also strange details that never quite added up. The missing passport, which police saw as evidence she'd fled the country, could just as easily have been taken by her abductor to prevent identification. The anonymous caller with the southern accent who claimed to have killed her, was he real or just another cruel hoax in a case full of false leads? Katie had gone to Medford, Oregon for the weekend to visit her boyfriend. Katie told her parents that she broke up with him sometime during the weekend. Her parents initially suspected her then-boyfriend, a Redmond resident, of her disappearance, but he was cleared by law enforcement, who confirmed he had been in Central Oregon at the time she disappeared. Over the decades, theories have multiplied. Some believe Katie was the victim of a serial predator like Joel Courtney. Others think the man in the blue blazer was someone she knew, perhaps someone from her work or social circle. The family even developed some suspects of their own, including 2 men seen by a gas station attendant around the time of Katie's disappearance. In a car driven by a woman the attendant thinks was Katie. The gas station sighting remains one of the most haunting aspects of the case. If it was really Katie, it suggests she was alive hours after leaving the Port of Portland building, but in grave danger. The image of a professionally dressed young woman returning disheveled and crying, accompanied by two unknown men, paints a picture too horrible to contemplate. Portland police have kept the case open, technically. Witnesses may contact Cold Case Homicide Unit investigators directly at 503-823-0400. Police Cold Case number 93-69837. Sergeant Pete Simpson, who knew Katie from college, says Cold Case investigators periodically receive tips on Katie's case, but so far none of them have panned out. In 2018, Friday marked the 25th anniversary of one of Portland's best-known cold cases. Katie Eggleston, a 22-year-old Oregon State University graduate, lived with her sister in Gresham in 1993 when she vanished. Now, over 30 years have passed, and Portland is no closer to answers. The disappearance of Katheryne Eggleston remains an enduring mystery that haunts Portland. Despite years of investigations, the lack of conclusive evidence and credible leads has left her case unsolved. Her story highlights the profound impact of unresolved cases on families and communities. Katie's family continues to seek answers, holding on to hope for breakthroughs that new information or advancements in technology might bring. Her case serves as a somber reminder of the importance of vigilance, community support, and persistent efforts in solving missing person cases. What makes Katie's case so haunting isn't just the mystery, it's the ordinary nature of that day. She wasn't somewhere dangerous. She wasn't doing anything risky. She was just doing her job, making sales calls, trying to build a career. The Port of Portland building wasn't some dark alley or abandoned warehouse. It was a busy office building. In broad daylight, Katie's family believes she was a victim of foul play and remains frustrated by the lack of progress in solving the cold case that has left them without closure. They spent decades fighting against the official narrative that Katie left voluntarily, knowing in their hearts that their daughter would never just walk away from her life. The ripple effects of Katie's disappearance spread far beyond her immediate family. Portland Police Sergeant Pete Simpson tells reporters he is personally haunted by Katie's disappearance. "We went to college together at Oregon State, knew her a little bit, lived next door, and a month before I got hired as a police officer, she went missing. For those who knew Katie, time has stood still in many ways. They age, but Katie remains forever 22, forever wearing purple, forever about to step off that elevator." The Eggleston family was dissatisfied with police seemingly favoring the runaway theory. They knew their daughter. They knew she wouldn't just disappear. The strange circumstances surrounding Katie's disappearance, including her missing passport allegedly for work identification and her recent breakup, added to the mystery. Each detail could be interpreted multiple ways. Was the passport taken as ID for work, as some suggested? Or was it removed to prevent identification of a body? Was her recent breakup relevant or just an unfortunate coincidence? The man in the blue blazer remains the key to this mystery. He is described as having dark hair and a dark complexion. Katie has never been heard from again, and the man she was last seen with has never been identified. Somewhere out there, someone knows who he was. Someone saw something. Someone knows what happened after Katie stepped off that elevator. The unanswered questions surrounding Katie's fate fuel ongoing interest in her case. Investigators and independent sleuths alike continue analyzing the circumstances of her disappearance. Advances in forensic technology, including DNA and digital analysis, could someday offer new possibilities. Technology that didn't exist in 1993 might one day provide answers. DNA databases have expanded exponentially. Security cameras are everywhere, And although they weren't in 1993, cell phone records, digital footprints, tools investigators can use today were science fiction when Katie vanished. But for now, Katie Eggleston remains frozen in time, a bright young woman with her whole life ahead of her, last seen at 2:15 on a Monday afternoon, stepping off an elevator with a stranger. Foul play is suspected in Katie's case, which remains unsolved. The tragedy of Katie Eggleston isn't just that she disappeared, it's that her disappearance was treated as a choice rather than a crime. It's that her parents died without answers. It's that her friends still dream of her, still see her in purple, still wait for her to answer their questions about where she's been. As of 2025, Katie's whereabouts remain unknown. 32 years have passed since that August afternoon. 32 years of birthdays uncelebrated, of holidays with an empty share, of a family's hearts forever broken. Katie would be 54 years old now. She might have been married, might have had children of her own. She might have built that successful career she was just starting. She might have traveled the world with that passport that went missing with her. We'll never know what Katie Eggleston might have become because someone, that man in the blue blazer or someone else, stole her future. But Katie's story isn't over. Despite extensive media coverage, searches, a dedicated tip line and theories explored, the investigation ultimately failed to determine what happened to Katheryne Eggleston, leaving her case as one of Portland's most infamous and baffling unsolved mysteries. Yet somewhere, someone knows the truth. Someone has carried this secret for over 3 decades. Maybe they've told someone else. Maybe the weight of it has become unbearable. Maybe they're reading this, remembering that hot August day in 1993, remembering a young woman in a purple blazer who never made it home. The Portland Police Cold Case Unit is still investigating. That tip line is still open. After all these years, all it might take is one phone call, one piece of information, one person deciding that Katie's family has suffered. Long enough, because that's the most heartbreaking part of this story. It doesn't have an ending. Katie Eggleston is still missing. Her family and friends are still waiting. Portland is still haunted by the question, what happened to Katie? Until that question is answered, Katie remains forever 22, forever in purple, forever stepping off that elevator into the unknown, and those who loved her remain forever waiting, forever hoping that someday, somehow, Katie will finally come home. The silence that surrounds Katie's fate is deafening. It speaks to all the words left unsaid, all the laughs never shared, all the memories never made. It reminds us that sometimes the most ordinary days can become extraordinary tragedies, that safety is often an illusion, and that justice delayed is justice denied. Katie Eggleston deserved better than to become a cold case number. She deserved better than to have her disappearance dismissed as voluntary. She deserved to live her life, to chase her dreams, to grow old surrounded by family and friends. Instead, she became one of the missing, a face on a flyer, a name in a database, a mystery that may never be solved. But as long as people remember Katie, as long as her story is told, there's hope. Hope that someone will finally speak up. Hope that technology will provide new leads. Hope that one day Katie's family will finally have the answers they've sought for so long. Until then, Katie Eggleston remains Portland's ghost, not a supernatural spirit, but something more tragic. A life cut short, a future stolen, a young woman who walked into an ordinary Monday and never walked out. Her story is a reminder that sometimes the most haunting mysteries aren't found in horror movies or crime novels. Sometimes they're found in the everyday moments when someone you love doesn't come home, and you spend the rest of your life wondering why.